Hello friends, welcome back to Book Demystified once again, and today we are going to discuss the book The Emotional Currency by Kate Levinson. You know, I was at a barbecue last weekend and my friend Mike was complaining about his wife's spending habits while literally grilling steaks that probably cost 40 bucks. Same guy who refuses to buy generic cereal to save $3, but thinks nothing of dropping 60 bucks on craft beer every week. Sound familiar? We all have these weird, illogical relationships with money that make absolutely no sense on paper, but somehow feel completely rational in our heads. Here's what Kate Levinson discovered after decades of working as a psychologist with people from all financial backgrounds, from folks struggling paycheck to paycheck to multimillionaires who still lie awake at night worrying about money. She found that our relationship with money has almost nothing to do with how much we actually have and everything to do with the emotional programming we picked up before we even knew what a dollar bill was. And here's the kicker. Most of us are walking around making financial decisions based on beliefs we formed when we were 7 years old, beliefs we've never even consciously examined. Think about this for a second. How do you feel when you check your bank account? Do you get a little anxiety spike even when you know you're doing okay? Or maybe you're one of those people who avoids looking at your finances altogether because it just feels too overwhelming. What about when someone asks you how much money you make? Do you feel proud, embarrassed, defensive? These aren't rational responses to numbers on a screen. These are emotional reactions that were programmed into you long before you ever had to worry about rent or student loans. By the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly where these money feelings come from, why they're secretly controlling every financial decision you make, and most importantly, how to rewire your emotional relationship with money so it starts working for you instead of against you. Because here's what Levinson reveals that most financial advisors never talk about. You can have all the budgeting apps and investment strategies in the world, but if your emotional money programming is messed up, you're going to keep self-sabotaging no matter how smart you are on paper. Let me tell you about my friend Jessica. This woman is brilliant. She's got a master's degree in engineering, makes over $100,000 a year, and can calculate compound interest in her head. But every time she gets close to having 6 months of expenses saved up, something happens. Last time it was an emergency kitchen renovation. The time before that, she decided she needed a new car, even though her Honda was running fine. Smart woman, solid income, but something deep down keeps her from ever feeling truly financially secure. Levinson would say Jessica has what she calls financial anxiety programming. Somewhere in her childhood, she learned that having too much money feels dangerous or wrong, so her subconscious mind keeps creating emergencies to bring her back to a financial comfort zone that actually makes her uncomfortable. It's like having a thermostat in your brain that's set to struggle, and every time you start to get ahead, it kicks in to bring you back down. This stuff goes way deeper than most people realize. Levinson talks about how we inherit money beliefs from our families just like we inherit eye color or height. If your parents fought about money constantly, you might have learned that money equals conflict, so you avoid financial conversations with your spouse even when you need to have them. If your family was always worried about not having enough, you might hoard money even when you have plenty, never allowing yourself to enjoy the security you've actually built. Or here's a big one for Americans. If your family treated money as something that rich people have, and you're not that kind of person, you might unconsciously sabotage yourself every time you start making real money because success doesn't fit your identity. I see this all the time with people who grew up working class and then land high-paying jobs. They'll spend every penny they make because having money feels like betraying where they came from. Levinson introduces this concept she calls your money story, basically the narrative you tell yourself about money based on what you observed and experienced growing up. Maybe your money story is, there's never enough, or money corrupts people, or I'm just not good with money. These stories feel like facts because you've been living them your whole life, but they're actually just beliefs, and beliefs can be changed. Here's where it gets really interesting. She breaks down different money personality types that emerge from these childhood experiences. There's the money worrier, who never feels secure no matter how much they have. There's the money avoider, who just can't deal with financial planning because it's too stressful. There's the money monk, who thinks wanting money makes them greedy or shallow. And there's the money amasser, who equates their net worth to their self-worth. I definitely recognize myself as a recovering money worrier after reading this book. Growing up, my family went through some tough financial times when I was in middle school. Nothing traumatic, but there were definitely months where my parents were stressed about making the mortgage payment. I absorbed this anxiety without even realizing it, and for years as an adult, I lived in constant fear of running out of money even when I had a stable job and solid savings. I checked my bank account multiple times a day, not because I needed to know the balance, but because I needed to reassure myself that the money was still there.
What's crazy is how these emotional patterns show up in completely irrational ways. Levinson gives this example of a woman who would spend 2 hours driving to different grocery stores to save $15 on her weekly shopping, but then drop $300 on a purse without thinking twice. Same person, same money, completely different emotional responses based on what each purchase meant to her psychologically. This is why traditional financial advice often doesn't work. You can tell someone to create a budget until you're blue in the face, but if their money story is, "I don't deserve nice things," they're going to keep under-saving for their goals. Or if their story is, "Money always disappears," they might avoid investing because putting money in the stock market feels like throwing it away, even though logically they know it's the path to long-term wealth. Levinson spent years working with families who had inherited serious wealth. We're talking tens of millions of dollars. And you'd think these people would be the happiest, most secure folks on the planet, right? Wrong. Many of them were absolutely miserable, racked with guilt about having money they didn't earn, terrified of making financial mistakes, or constantly worried that people only liked them for their money. Having money didn't solve their emotional money issues, it just magnified them. She tells this story about a client who inherited $20 million from his grandfather, but spent years living in a studio apartment and working at a coffee shop because he felt like he didn't deserve the inheritance. His money story was so strongly programmed around earning your way that accepting unearned wealth violated his core identity. Meanwhile, the money just sat in accounts doing nothing because he was too conflicted to even think about it. On the flip side, she worked with families who had very little money but felt incredibly abundant because their money story was about gratitude and making the most of what they had. These folks could stretch a dollar further than you'd think possible, not because they had to, but because they'd learned to find joy and creativity in living simply. The book really opened my eyes to how much our culture shapes these money beliefs too. Think about the messages Americans get about money from day one. We're taught that hard work always leads to financial success, which means if you're struggling financially, you must not be working hard enough. We're told that rich people are either lucky or evil, so wanting wealth makes you greedy. We're shown constant images of luxury lifestyles on social media, making us feel like we're failing if we can't afford designer everything. And don't even get me started on how we handle money conversations in American families. Most parents would rather talk to their kids about sex than about the family's financial situation. Kids grow up with no understanding of how money actually works, but they absorb all the emotional energy around it. The stress, the arguments, the secrecy, the shame. No wonder so many of us reach adulthood with completely dysfunctional money relationships. Levinson talks about what she calls money scripts, these automatic thoughts that pop into our heads whenever we're dealing with financial decisions. Scripts like, "I can't afford it even when you can," or "I'll start saving when I make more money even though you've been saying that for years," or "I'm just not a numbers person," when really you're just scared of what the numbers might tell you. I caught myself running one of these scripts just last month. I was looking at upgrading my laptop for work, and even though I had the money saved and desperately needed a better computer, I kept telling myself I don't really need it, and maybe I should wait for a sale. It took me weeks to realize this wasn't about the laptop at all. It was about an old money script from childhood that said wanting nice things is selfish. Once I recognized the script for what it was, buying the laptop became easy. Hey, if you're enjoying our free book summaries and want to support what we do, there are a few easy ways to help. You can subscribe to the channel, become a member, or grab the book using our affiliate link in the description. And if you'd like to go a step further, you can also leave a tip via PayPal or UPI. The link's below. Every bit of support helps us keep creating valuable content for you. Now here's where Levinson's work gets really practical. She doesn't just diagnose these money issues, she gives you tools to actually change your relationship with money. One of the most powerful exercises she recommends is what she calls a money autobiography. Basically, you write down your earliest memories involving money, the messages you heard about money growing up, and the financial behaviors you observed in your family. When I did this exercise, I was shocked at what came up. I remember being maybe 8 years old and hearing my dad say, "We can't afford that," about something I wanted, and the shame I felt, like I was bad for even asking. I remember my mom hiding shopping bags and receipts from my dad, which taught me that spending money was something to feel guilty about. I remember overhearing worried conversations about bills and absorbing this sense that money was always a source of stress and never a source of joy.
Writing all this down helped me understand why I felt anxious every time I made a purchase, even when it was totally within my budget. It wasn't about the money. It was about these old emotional patterns that equated spending with guilt and financial awareness with anxiety. Once I could see where these feelings came from, I could start to separate my adult financial reality from my childhood money programming. Another powerful technique Levinson teaches is what she calls emotional bookkeeping. This is where you track not just what you spend money on, but how you feel before, during, and after financial decisions. You might notice that you always buy coffee when you're feeling lonely, or that you avoid checking your investment accounts when the market is down because you're scared of bad news. I started doing this and realized I had some really weird emotional spending patterns. Whenever I felt overwhelmed at work, I'd order stuff online. Not because I needed anything, but because clicking Buy Now gave me a temporary sense of control. When I felt proud of an accomplishment, I'd go out for expensive dinners. Not because I was hungry, but because I wanted to celebrate in a way that felt proportional to my success. Understanding these patterns helped me find healthier ways to deal with those emotions. The book also dives deep into how money affects relationships, and this part really hit home for me. Levinson shows how couples often get stuck in these destructive financial dynamics where one person becomes the spender and the other becomes the saver, and then they fight about money constantly without ever addressing the underlying emotional issues. She tells this story about a couple where the husband grew up in a family that never talked about money but always seemed to have enough, while the wife grew up in a family where every penny was discussed and worried over. The husband's approach to money felt careless and irresponsible to the wife, while the wife's approach to money felt anxious and controlling to the husband. They weren't really fighting about the budget. They were fighting about two completely different emotional relationships with money that they'd inherited from their families. What's beautiful about Levinson's approach is that she doesn't judge any of these money patterns as right or wrong. If you're a natural saver, that's not better or worse than being a natural spender. They're just different emotional responses that developed for different reasons. The goal isn't to become someone else. It's to become conscious of your patterns so you can make deliberate choices instead of just reacting from old programming. She also talks about what she calls money grief, the sadness that comes from recognizing how your unconscious money beliefs have held you back or caused you to make decisions that weren't in your best interest. Maybe you realize you've been undercharging for your services because you don't believe you deserve more money. Maybe you see how fear of financial risk has kept you from investing and building wealth. This grief is actually a healthy part of the healing process because you can't change patterns you haven't fully acknowledged. One of the most profound sections deals with money and self-worth. Levinson shows how many of us unconsciously equate our bank account balance to our value as human beings. When our net worth goes up, we feel good about ourselves. When it goes down, we feel like failures. But here's the thing. Your worth as a person has absolutely nothing to do with your financial situation. You're not more valuable when you get a raise and less valuable when you have an unexpected expense. It was a huge revelation for me. I realized I'd been using money as a scorecard for my life, constantly comparing my financial progress to my friends and feeling either superior or inferior based on who was doing better financially. It was exhausting, and it was making it impossible to just enjoy the money I did have. Learning to separate my self-worth from my net worth was one of the most liberating things I've ever done. Levinson also addresses something that's particularly relevant for Americans, the psychology of debt. She explains how debt carries enormous emotional weight in our culture, often way beyond its actual financial impact. People will sacrifice their health, their relationships, even their future earning potential to avoid debt, even when taking on strategic debt would actually improve their financial situation. I've seen this with friends who refuse to use credit cards even though they could earn cash back and build credit history, all because their parents drilled into them that debt is evil. Or people who won't take out student loans for graduate school that would significantly increase their earning potential because they're terrified of owing money. These aren't rational financial decisions, they're emotional reactions to debt that were programmed in childhood. On the flip side, some people use debt as a way to avoid dealing with their financial reality. If you can always put expenses on credit cards, you never have to face the fact that you're spending more than you earn. The debt becomes a way to maintain an identity or lifestyle that your actual income can't support. What I love about this book is how practical Levinson makes the healing process. She gives you specific exercises to identify your money scripts, techniques to interrupt old patterns when they come up, and strategies to create new, healthier relationships with money. It's not about positive thinking or pretending money doesn't matter. It's about becoming conscious of your unconscious patterns so you can make choices from a place of awareness instead of reaction.
One technique that really worked for me was what she calls money dialogues. When you're facing a financial decision, instead of just going with your gut reaction, you pause and ask yourself, what would my 7-year-old self do in this situation? What would my parents do? What would I do if I wasn't carrying any emotional baggage around money? Often, you'll get 3 completely different answers, and that awareness alone helps you make more conscious choices. She also recommends creating what she calls a money mission statement, a clear, written description of what you want your relationship with money to look like. Not just financial goals like save $1 million, but emotional goals like I want to feel calm and confident when making financial decisions, or I want money to be a tool for creating the life I want, not a source of stress and anxiety. Writing my own money mission statement was incredibly clarifying. I realized that what I really wanted wasn't just more money. It was a sense of freedom and security that would allow me to be generous with others and take calculated risks in pursuing my dreams. That mission statement has guided countless financial decisions since then, helping me distinguish between spending that aligns with my values and spending that's just emotional reaction. The book also tackles the unique challenges that come with major financial transitions: getting married, having kids, starting a business, inheriting money, facing financial setbacks. Levinson shows how these transitions often trigger our deepest money fears and can either strengthen or destroy our financial well-being depending on how consciously we navigate them. She tells this amazing story about a woman who'd spent years building a successful business but kept sabotaging herself every time she got close to real financial breakthrough. Turns out she'd internalized the message from her mother that women who cared too much about money aren't feminine. So every time her income grew, she'd find ways to spend or give it away to maintain her identity as someone who wasn't motivated by money. Once she recognized this pattern, she was able to separate her financial success from her identity as a woman and finally allow herself to build real wealth. As we wrap up here, I want to share the 3 biggest insights from this book that can immediately start transforming your relationship with money. First, your money behaviors are not character flaws. They're logical responses to the emotional programming you received often before you were even old enough to understand what money was. This means you can change them once you become aware of them. Second, healing your money relationship requires more than just budgeting and investing advice. You have to address the emotional and psychological patterns that drive your financial decisions. All the financial education in the world won't help if you're unconsciously sabotaging yourself because of old programming. And third, money is never just about money. It represents security, freedom, power, love, control, or whatever else you learned it meant when you were young. Until you understand what money represents to you emotionally, you'll keep making decisions that don't serve your rational best interests. The beautiful thing about doing this inner work is that it doesn't just improve your finances, it improves your entire life. When you're not carrying around shame, fear, and anxiety about money, you have more emotional energy for everything else that matters to you. When you understand your money patterns, you can make conscious choices that align with your actual values, instead of just reacting from old programming. Your relationship with money affects every area of your life, your career choices, your relationships, your stress levels, your sense of self-worth, even your physical health. Isn't it worth taking the time to understand and heal those patterns so they start working for you instead of against you? Kate Levinson has given us a roadmap for that healing, and it starts with simply becoming curious about your own money story instead of judging it. Thanks for taking this journey with me today, and remember, you have the power to rewrite your money story starting right now. I'll see you in the next one, where we'll explore another book that can transform how you think about wealth and success.